Hey, good evening. Kathy Beatty here with Divorce Support Anonymous. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's Friday, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Time, whatever we're in with Daylight Savings Time. I don't know where we're at, but we're in the East Coast, so we're Eastern Time. Welcome. I'm glad that you're joining us. We are going to talk about an interesting practical topic tonight. I know I try to cover a wide range of issues and problems that people have as they go through divorce. Tonight, I want to get real practical in discussion with you tonight. However, a couple of announcements. I want you to know, first of all, you can ask questions, you can make comments, you can text, you can phone. If you have a particular question, and you may have a question because I'm an expert joining us tonight as we talk about finances. So I want to make sure that you're aware that we can have this as a conversation. And so I invite you to do that. I also want to let you know about November 30th through January 4th. We are holding a no cost to you support group Tuesday nights, 7 o'clock. We're going to start Eastern Time again. And we are going to go through the holidays, November 4th. Realize November 30th is after Thanksgiving. I couldn't fit it in my schedule before that. But I do want to talk about Thanksgiving, our first night, realizing if you're going through it the first time, second time, sometimes even the third time, it's difficult to do. So we want to be sure and talk you through. And I labeled it Lonely and Afraid because I didn't want to make it pretty. I wanted to make it real. Many of you are lonely and afraid as you go through the holidays, particularly for the very first time. So I want to give you some support to get you through that. Okay, tonight, what else was I going to talk about? A few scripture verses. I'll get to those in just a minute. But tonight I want to talk about fear. And one of the main areas where we may feel fear is finances. So fear happens because we don't know what's going to happen next. And when there is loss, it creates fear. And one of those areas in particular that we are fearful about are finances. So I want to discuss that tonight. We feel anxious, we feel afraid because of the unknown, because of the loss that we are going through in divorce. Fear is a very natural reaction when we lose control. And many of us have lost a lot of control when it comes to finances. So let's talk about fear. What do we do when we feel fear? We have anxiety and fear. We can do some deep breathing. Did you know that when we are stressed, we breathe very shallow? And this really restrains the oxygen to get to all of our body parts, all our mind, our brain. So we need to, when we are feeling fearful and anxious, to take those deep breaths. It does make a difference. We can also exercise when we are fearful because what's happening in our body is the adrenaline is building up. And so when we exercise, we can release some of that adrenaline and that cortisol, the bad stuff that swims around in our body as we are stressed and fearful. We can also journal. And we can find experts and we can address the real issues, not the emotional or imaginary, but the real issues that we are dealing with. And like I said, as we discuss money tonight, that is one area where many of us are fearful. So, as I mentioned, we're going to find the experts. So, I wanted to bring in someone who you've seen before in the past, who disclaims being an expert in finances, but he is an attorney. He's also a mediator, and he teaches financial classes, and that is none other than Mr. Peter Letzman. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Kathy. Thank you for inviting me.
Good to have you here. So I want to talk about the fear of our finances, because that is something that many of us experience. So when I speak with you tonight, I like to have us talk about how to decide what you need as you go through divorce financially. So let's address some of those. And are there any general statements that you'd like to make before we get started?
Absolutely. I'm never without statements. The first thing that all that you said about fear is absolutely valid, but I'd like to ask one more element. We are afraid. We fear the unknown. We don't know. Remember, as a child, you were afraid to go in the closet because the closet was dark. You didn't know what was in the closet. You were afraid to go under the bed because it was dark. You didn't know what was in the under the bed. Likewise, in the forest, in the woods, you were afraid of the unknown. Even in high school, you were afraid of asking the boy out for Sadie Hawkins dance because you were afraid. So we of the unknown. Would he say yes? Would he say no? Blah blah blah. The same thing permeates your finances. So the first thing is find out where you are, find out what you have, find out what the family finances are. And especially as you're going into the divorce and really after the divorce and for the rest of your life, find out what are your assets, what value things of value do you have, and what debts do you have, and then you balance the values versus the debt, sort of the financial balance sheet, the net worth statement that you have. Mm-hmm. A little aside though, I want to mention that especially during the divorce, when you ask the spouse as to, you know, where is our money, and you inquire about that, we have a tendency, not that they're malicious necessarily, but they have a tendency to minimize the money that they have to make them look a little bit poorer, make you look a little richer. You know, they try and color the financial picture. So in terms of getting the financial picture, your debts and your assets, verify the numbers, bank statements, documents, the value of the house. Determine the value of the house by an appraiser. If not an appraiser, certainly market value, maybe SEV, state equalized value. Have some way of determining what your money. Many of the mediations I have, the individual comes in and says, "I think the house is worth $50,000." And the other spouse says, "Well, I think it's worth $250,000. And what proofs do you have? What verification? What document do you have?" "Well, I think it's worth that much." That isn't going to make it.
Right. So
the first step is know what your situation is.
Okay, let's jump into some of these questions, because we're going to address those of you who maybe your divorce is finished and now all of the responsibility of finances is yours. And this can be overwhelming. So again, as what Peter had stated, to write it all down, put it all in a spreadsheet, look at all of it in front of you so you can become accustomed to. And Peter and I both in mediation, we see one of the parties is not really informed of the finances. And it's not always just the women. Sometimes it's the men who are not informed of the finances. So as you become this newly single person, put everything out in front of you, take an evaluation of what you have. But let me ask the question, Peter, How will a budget help my fear of money during divorce and after divorce?
The budget will help you because it forces you to look at what you actually have. What is your income, the money stream that's going to come into the family on which you're going to live, and your outgo, the expenses that you're going to have to spend. And again, if you know what it is and you know that you're getting a whole lot more income then you have expenses, there is no fear. If you recognize that there's more expenses than there is income, then you adjust accordingly and you know that you've sort of conquered your fear by adjusting the expenses and you can meet the expenses with the adjusted income. So that's a budget will indeed the budget will help tremendously with overcoming the fear. Again, you know your situation, not only the status where you are, but the flow, the inflow and the outflow. We learned that at CPA school, inflow and outflow, income and expenses, really.
When I first went through my divorce, and I disappeared for a minute because I ran to my refrigerator to grab this sign. Because when I was first going through divorce, I wandered into a craft show and I saw this sign. And I was not one who was really good or informed on finances. And I thought, if I can do this, if I can live within my harvest, which is what comes in, the income that I have, I'm going to make it. Whatever happens, I'm going to make it. I'm not going to drown in debt. So this 23 years later is still on top of my refrigerator as a reminder. So thank you for that. Next question is there a best system, an app or something that you recommend for managing money?
Yes, it's called paper and pencil. I'm dead serious about that. When you literally put it down on paper and do it with a pencil, a number 2 pencil, and have a big pink pearl eraser because you're going to make adjustments as to balance the budget. So be prepared. Don't do it in ink. And it's a learning process. It will be helpful. Yes, I would suggest then after you've done it for 6 months or a year on paper, then you can go on to some app, and there are all sorts of there's Mint, which is free. Ramsey has an app. Suze Norman has an app. They're all over the place, and you shop around, look around, see one that works for you. But if you're going to ask me for a recommendation, it's the pen and paper that is the starting out point that I would strongly recommend.
I love that because then it really allows you to get a handle on your finances, doesn't it? To really know.
Instead of having a little rectangular screen that you're looking at, you see the whole wide, like you say, spreadsheet. You see the whole Monty is laying in front of you, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
And if you talk about the budget, whether that's a good technique or not, let me just speak on behalf of the budget. Most successful families have a budget. I would suggest all successful families have a budget. Some have it on paper and they discipline themselves because that discipline comes with the budget. But if we take a look at the corporations, there is no successful corporation in America that is working without a budget. They know in advance where their income is going to come, where their sales, where their services, and where their outgo is, where the raw products and materials are. Every successful entity, including my family, me, works on a budget so that I know where I'm at and I know that the outgo does not exceed the income.
Yeah. Except for the federal government, we all have to have a budget, right?
Well, they do have a budget, but they don't pay attention to it, and they for sure don't live within the budget. And sooner or
Right.
later, the collector, the forecloser, is going to come knocking at our door.
Yeah, for sure. So how can I, speaking to the fear, I'm fearful of my financial future. How can I not only feel confident, but know that I'm confident, know that I can make it financially?
Well, if you do your budget accurately and account for all the contingencies, all the things that are going to happen, you've got to have lodging, you've got to have transportation, you've got to have food. Clothing is optional. No, I think clothing is, sorry, that's a little joke. Clothing, in your budget, you can, it's important, especially if you're in business or so on, to be. And the thing that we forget frequently is children, in terms of their special needs, or not special needs, but their financial needs.
Yeah.
For example, if you have a hockey player in your family, or you have a couple hockey players in your family, that's going to cost you more than your car payment.
Yeah.
So think about all of those. Are you going to have private school? Going to go public school? Think of all of those things that you are going to possibly make. And then you have to take a hard and fast look at what your income stream is going to be. Are you going to be working? Are you going to have child support? Are you going to have spousal support? Is there any other source of income that you may have, or stocks or bonds or so on? And then you're going to have to adjust accordingly. And yes, if the income is great, is out there, but most of us find after divorce that the income shrinks substantially, and the outgo still seems to be the same as we had before, especially if you keep the house, for example, or you keep driving the same car, for example. I had a case I mediated this morning where the spouse, the wife, was driving a $40,000 car. She owed $20,000 on that car. She had $20,000 in equity. There was no money else available, and her lawyer says, sell the car, drive a $20,000 car so you don't have any car payments, and take that extra $20,000 and use it for family matters. And likewise, this is the time you're going to have to make some hard decisions in terms of downsizing the car. Take a look at your lodging. One of the cars and lodging are the main expenses that we have. We may not be able to continue to live in that 3-bedroom 2,000 square foot home. We may have to downsize into a bungalow, or some other way that is not going to be as expensive, and that's going to be hard to take. But if you know that that's the fact of life, that's what we're going to do, you can do it with a degree of comfort. You're not going to be afraid to say, will I have enough money at the end of the month? Will I have enough money at the end of the year to pay taxes? Will I have enough money at the end of, or towards the end of my life, to retire? If you make that plan and you have that budget, and we haven't even talked about savings and emergency funds and things like that, we can get into the details of the budget. But if you have that plan where you see, again, like I said, income and outgo, and you're controlling that. And Kathy, if I don't want to lose the fact that we're going to have, in most cases, we're going to have to do some real belt tightening. And we can get real slick and say, well, we're going to, what is it, minimalize or something like that. We're going to get plain and simple in our lifestyle.
Yeah.
And we can use that as a fad. And there's lots of information how to be a minimalist, and that's what we may have to do. We may not just have the luxury that we have. And the unfortunate statistic is that most women, or at least, or nearly half of the women who are divorced, live under the poverty level.
Yeah. And so that requires that we get knowledgeable, that we don't just be a financial reflex, but that we take control of our finances. And we look at, and the house is such a, I mean, we could do a whole half an hour just on the house, because I know the emotions of having a stable home for your children is so incredibly important. But if you're going to be house poor, it's just not worth it to maintain the home. So I know our time is flying. Go
Before
ahead.
you leave this, Kathy, I just wanted to put out, and you say that you give them hope, your clients and your viewers hope. And let
Yeah.
me add an element of hope is
Mhm.
that if you do your discipline, if you do your budget, and you control your finances and you do work in the maybe you go out and get a job or a part-time job or so on, things do get better. The expenses maybe are less. You get control of that. You tighten the budget. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And I have worked with people for 10 years that had a fantastic amount of debt that slowly, like the tortoise and the hare, slow and consistent. They've not dug themselves out of the hole and are comfortable and are on the way to retirement. And the kids have gone to school. Mom has helped them with school, not carte blanche, everything. They've got the point I'm making. If you do it right financially, you don't have to have fear. Do it right, and there will be hope at the end, or towards the end of this whole process. And
Yeah.
plan your life. I think, isn't that one of the elements in your book about life after divorce?
Yes, yes, it is. It's one of the chapters in this, Building Your Future After Divorce. We certainly do talk about finances. Um,
Can I do one other thing though, Kathy, before we
yes,
leave? We
yes,
we and I know you're running out of time. I just want to talk about kids a little bit.
great.
And kids are depending upon what, well, it just depends. Sometimes the kids, they want to keep up with the Joneses. They want to buy the name brand, the Gucci, the Nike, the Apple, and all of those things that you may not be able to do. And I think today is the time to start, and it's got to be age appropriate. You can't talk to a 7-year-old and talk all the details of the budget,
Right.
but indicate, what are some of the changes that we may have to make. You're going to talk about change of life, living. You may have to move. You're going to, there's going to be changes in, dad is not going, or mom is not going to be in the house anymore. And
Yeah.
with that conversation, bring in the money. And again, I say age appropriate, start now, and
Mhm.
and distinguish. If there's one thing that you could do, distinguish the difference between a need and a want. And the kids can learn that early on in life.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very important. And I know that the parents that I work with is not so much the kids as it is the parents, because they realize their kids are going through so much loss. And now they're going to be what parents feel as depriving their children of what they once had. But it is all going to depend on your attitude, on how it's presented. So we can present it in a positive way. We can simplify. We can make it a challenge. We can present it in a way that's going to help our children through it.
And one final last warning: do not try and buy the children's affection with
Mm,
gifts, money, trips, and things like that.
Yeah.
There will be a competition between the two spouses and buying those things, and don't blame the other spouse about your financial problems and so on. Just talk to the kids about what the situation is going to be at home. Don't be spouse bashing over the finances. That's not going to be positive.
Absolutely. You'll simply hurt your children. I know in one of the pages in this book, if you've not received this yet, it's available on Amazon, 30 Days of Healing After Divorce. And one of the chapters I write, denial or avoidance is the enemy to your healing. And that is very true financially as well as emotionally and spiritually. So healing our finances is actually a topic in this book because we do need healing financially with our mental perception of finances, of what the need is and what the want is, and how can we simplify our life because it's so complicated when you go through a divorce. How can we simplify our life so we can better get through the process of divorce? Peter Letzman, always a joy and informative to have you. And I know you have a wrap-up comment.
The wrap-up comment that I have, and I know, Kathy, you like to leave your viewers with a Bible verse or two. And let me just share with you, if you want to have a biblical knowledge of finances, read the book of Proverbs, 31 chapters. Read a chapter every day, and you will become a CPA ready to take care of the world and take care of your finances.
Yeah, absolutely. Great words. Great words. And thank you for the reminder because I have several verses here that I neglected to share with you. With his love, he will calm your fears. Talks about in the book of Zephaniah. Cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. For I am the Lord your God who takes hold of your right hand and says, do not fear, I will help you. And I have seen in my own life how God has helped me financially in providing for me. So I would encourage you to take the class, such as the Ramsey class or another financial class. Don't be afraid to learn, to go to experts and say, I need help in this area, because that is going to help you grow and give you more confidence to handle all of those fears financially. So find that person. Doesn't have to be a professional that you have to pay. There are classes available. There are people available to mentor you. So take advantage of those individuals. Peter, thank you for being here, for talking about a very, very important topic that we have only scratched the surface of. Hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Good night.
Good night, and thank you. With that, we will call it a night, and I appreciate you being with us as we discuss those important issues as you are going through the trauma of divorce. This is Kathy Beatty with Divorce Support Anonymous, wanting to be with you, alongside of you, to help you go through the trauma of divorce. Have a good weekend. Good night.